I called the book I wrote about this called Rumors of Another World. And to me, those are rumors. They're not proofs, but they're rumors. There are times in our lives when we pay attention and wonder, is there something else going on? For me, when I experienced profound beauty, I told you about the ways I did through romantic love and classical music and the beauties of nature, I start thinking, maybe there's more. Maybe there's more. At hinge moments in life, you will probably sense that. I have a friend in Chicago who is a pastor, he's ordained, and he runs a web service where he will marry you. And so he interviews all these people, they call him up, he always has them come over to his house, a couple, and he'll say, have you ever been to church? No, I don't go to church. Okay. Why did you call a pastor? Well, we just thought, if there's something this important, maybe, I don't know, somehow it might be nice to have God involved. Oh, okay. And then he leads to discussions about that. Our funerals. I was at one just a week ago. A person in downtown Denver committed suicide, very sad funeral. And so many people stood up one by one and told about what a wonderful person this was. And I kept thinking, if only Bruce had heard these words 5 days ago, he may not have killed himself because he didn't think he was a wonderful person. I've never once gone to a funeral where somebody stood up and talked about, oh man, George, he had the greatest 50-inch gas plasma television screen. Oh man, you should have seen George's stereo system. Oh, he drove an Audi A4, 6-speed. They don't talk about that. They talk about how George was generous, George was kind, George was funny. In actual fact, George was kind of a jerk. But at funerals, it's funny, at funerals, at this moment, this hinge moment when life ends, we instinctively want to remember the good things, the lasting things. George spent his entire life trying to accumulate, and he was a jerk in doing it, and yet we couldn't quite come to terms with that. We wanted to believe more about George. We lied, even at his funeral. Those are the rumors that we hear, and they are just rumors. You have to pay attention to them. Our own culture is telling us a lot of other messages very loudly. If you want to know what our culture values, go to any newsstand here in your town, college campus, and just look. I do this regularly. Airport, on the way through, I just stop at the newsstand and I look. What can I learn about American 21st century culture from these magazine covers? Well, first thing I learned is we like women taking their clothes off. About half of all the magazine covers I see are women without much on. So we value bodies, and we value men's bodies too. You see athletes. Then you read further. I remember when Michael Jordan retired the second time. He was retired 3 times now. And when he retired the second time, some sports writer figured this up and calculated that Michael Jordan, the next year, for not playing basketball, okay, he's retired. He's got $100 million from Nike. He's got all these endorsements. Would earn twice as much money that next year for not playing basketball as all presidents in the history of the United States put together. Now that says something about our society to me. You could probably make a good case that Michael Jordan deserves more than some particular presidents. We won't get into that tonight. But if our society pays Michael Jordan, I like Michael Jordan. I lived in Chicago. I watched him play. I think it's wonderful. But if we value the ability to put a round object into a larger round object more than all of the leaders of our democracy in history, that's a little crazy, I think. And I go and I stand at the checkout lines and I watch the people who buy these magazines. This is the United States. Scientists tell us that 64% of Americans are overweight. And having watched the checkout stands, I agree. That is true. So you see all these overweight, kind of slovenly Americans buying these magazines of these skinny, beautiful people. And you think, isn't this strange that Here we have this great value of Jessica Simpson, Jennifer Lopez, and people drool over them, and none of them look. Where are these people? I've never met one. Isn't that strange that we live with this illusion? And the things that are so important, we're told, in this culture, in some ways don't matter. My wife used to work at a hospice. She was a chaplain at a hospice. In this hospice, you had to be very near death just to get in. In fact, the average person who went to that hospice lived only 10 days before dying. So these are people at the very end of life. And she would come home and tell me about the people she got to know. And sometimes I would go down with her. And some of these people were very famous. They were people who played for the Denver Broncos in 1957. And they would have clippings on the wall of their time in the sun. Or they would be socialites, and again, newspaper clippings. And some of these people were rich, millionaires. And some of these people had no money at all. They were scraped off the street by policemen. No hospital wants them. It would just increase their mortality rate, so they took them to this hospice. It's a charity hospice. And the interesting thing is that all the things that we spend so much of our energy doing, having beautiful bodies, having large bank accounts, none of those things mattered to the people in the hospice. There were no beautiful bodies in that hospice. And the things, the size of your bank account, no, that millionaire would have given all of his bank account if he wasn't in that hospice and he had years left of life. These things that we spend our lives on, Jesus told stories about. They told about a farmer who built bigger and bigger barns, and at the end, he finally had the barn as big as he wanted, and then he thought, then the next day he died. And Jesus says, what does it profit you if you gain the whole world and lose your soul? Why are we chasing this celebrity culture and this cult of beauty and possessions when these things they don't last?